The Spanish-American War started after the USS Maine was sunk following an explosion in the harbor of Havana, Cuba. This immediately escalated tensions between the US and Spain, but the first shots of the conflict were fired on the other side of the globe in the Philippine Islands. In just one day, the US Asiatic Fleet under Admiral George Dewey destroyed the older outgunned Spanish warships on May 1, 1898, during the Battle of Manila. After Philippine and American soldiers defeated the Spanish troops in August, the war in the islands ended. In December 1898, the United States and Spain signed a peace treaty under which the U.S. acquired the Spanish colony of the Philippines. Over the next half-century, thanks in good measure to General Arthur MacArthur and his son General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, the Philippines were treated as a protectorate rather than as a colony. Arthur MacArthur taught his son that America's role in Asia was different from those of other Western nations that were busy seizing trade concessions and colonies. He instructed Douglas that the role of the U.S. was to lend the light of democracy to people who had never experienced its warm, comforting glow, and to make America the symbol of freedom in a world that at times seemed to put a premium on its opposite. Despite his initially difficult command in the Philippines and dealing with guerrilla warfare, Arthur was unable to convince the opposition of his good intentions. He embraced the Filipino people, established strong political relationships, and laid the foundation for the development of a free society. When Arthur completed his tour of duty, he was ordered to appear before Congress. He testified that he had a good deal of faith in the Filipino people because they were smart, generous, intelligent, and had the capacity to reach any standard of excellence in almost any direction. During his brief time of command, Arthur MacArthur had established an enduring precedent of mutual trust and respect between his family and the people of the Philippines. In this same spirit, the United States and the Filipino people continued to work together in future years, establishing the Philippines as a respected and independent democracy. These strong international relations would become critical as the Empire of Japan emerged as a brutal and conquering power during the 1930s. Arthur's son, General Douglas MacArthur, was in charge of the defense of the Philippines in the days following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Douglas knew these islands extremely well because he had been stationed there before. After graduating from West Point, one of his first postings was in the Philippines, where he shared many of his father's views of the people and culture. His objective was the strategic preparation and planning for a potential defense of the islands, and during that process, he gained valuable insights on the topography of critical areas like Manila, Bataan, and Corregidor. Douglas MacArthur left the Philippines and for over 30 years continued his military service in the U.S. Army. But in October 1935, he returned as a military advisor to Philippine President Manuel Quezon. He was given the daunting task of building a local military force strong enough to repel potential Japanese invasion. Shortly thereafter, MacArthur was named Field Marshal of the National Philippine Army, which unfortunately was applied with only outdated World War I-era weapons and equipment. The Japanese were at war with China and considered the U.S. a strategic enemy, but MacArthur's requests for newer weapons and an increase in U.S. forces were repeatedly denied. The Great Depression limited both funds and political attention for the defense of the Philippines, because although President Roosevelt promised not to abandon them, both he and the U.S. Congress refused to provide MacArthur with the necessary resources. After the attack on Pearl Harbor and the U.S. entry into World War II, the Philippines would definitely be on their own. President Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill agreed that defeating the Nazi regime in Europe was of greater importance than defeating the Japanese. On December 8, 1941, the Empire of Japan began its brutal invasion of the Philippine Islands.